Hello and welcome to the Star Wars Guys YouTube channel where the Force is family. I am Master Paul. Excuse me. After a bit of a unplanned hiatus for the past, week and a half or so, we are back. We're back on our regular schedule, and we are here to talk about book 2 of the Thrawn trilogy. Now, real quick, why are we only waiting till now to get to this? Um, Long story short, 2 weeks ago I got COVID. And so I kind of have a standing rule that I set for myself as far as the channel goes, where if I'm too sick to work, I'm too sick to stream. Mostly just to cover my own butt in case work sees me streaming while I'm home, so they can be like, wait a minute, he's streaming, but he was too sick to come to work. What's up with that? So it's just something better safe than sorry. But anyways, we are talking about Dark Force Rising. This is the second book in the Thrawn trilogy. We talked about the first one, I believe, 3 weeks ago now. And if you wanted to see my thoughts on that one, I'll just go over it really quick. The Thrawn trilogy was something that I wanted to get into for the longest time. Never could either find the time or interest to do it. And I certainly don't have the attention span to actually sit down and read a book. So the audiobook versions is how I've been enjoying it. And real quick, let me bring on my co-host for the night. And since I'm feeling a little bit dangerous tonight, I'm going to welcome him in with a certain image. Here he is, Mr. Phil McCracken.
Hey.
But
I hate you all.
In all seriousness, how you doing tonight, Phil?
I'm a little upset.
What's wrong?
Well, I bought a tank on World of Tanks as a auction. I won the auction, and I'm still waiting for him to give me my damn tank.
I see. And you know the rules.
Language, and for gosh sake, watch your language.
Damn is not a bad word.
Language, and for gosh sake, watch your language.
I can do this all day.
Okay, but it's still not a bad word.
It is on this channel.
No, we got to rise above it.
Anyways, let's say hello to everyone in the chat real quick. We have, of course, Baron Norman Tags Fandomology, who says this is what episode 7 should have been. I 100% agree.
I think he meant 8. He meant 8.
That's okay though. And hello, of course, to Mary Lanning, and of course, hello, who also says I've already read that book. Awesome. And hello to Resolute Rebellion, who says, did they tell you thanks for the money, Phil? That's a good one. All right, so book 2 in the Thrawn trilogy, Dark Force Rising. So before we get into what we think of the book, there's something that I'm a bit curious about that that literally just occurred to me. I'm a bit curious, like, how long was there a wait between book 1 and book 2? According to Wikipedia, yeah, okay, so it was a year. Heir to the Empire released in 91, Dark Force Rising released in 92, and Last Command, which we'll talk about next week, released in 93. So I want to start by talking about that time period, Phil, between the first book and the second one. How well do you remember that time period?
92, what a great year.
Yeah.
I will say I remember it quite well. I remember the enthusiasm after the first book, waiting on that second book.
Mm-hmm.
And the hoopla, okay? Just as much why it wasn't on the scale of a movie or on the scale like what was that Nintendo 64 game?
Dark Forces?
not Dark Forces, the other one with that other
Shadows of the Empire.
Shadows of the Empire.
Yes.
Shadows of the Empire had everything a movie release had, but the movie had games, magazines, books, action figures.
Mm-hmm.
But that's after this, way after this. There was a little bit of hoopla where Lucasfilms did promoting it with the cover. There were action figures, but as far as like games and everything, they still didn't know what they had.
Right.
But Dark Force Rising, I remember I have all three on hard book, the hard book hardcover. But to me, it was I remember I had it ordered, and since my ex-wife at the time worked at the mall, I had her pick it up for me. So
Okay.
I didn't have to go through that whole line, and like I said, she worked at the mall, so she was able to go in there. She knew the people working there, so she got her book, my book, right away, so she didn't have to wait in line. There was actually a waiting line to pick on the pre-orders of the books. I'm trying to remember the name of the bookstore. It wasn't Walden. It was a popular
Books a
bookstore.
Million or Barnes and Noble.
I might have been Barnes and Noble. I think it was Barnes and Noble. But yeah, but again, it was Star Wars hunger, because you have to remember, before the previous book in this, there was nothing.
Right. That's 83 to 91.
Yeah, I mean, you might have had re-releases of action figures. You might have had a couple comic books here and there, but as far as like new Star Wars material, you didn't have it.
Of course.
With this, definitely the first one. The second one, there was a little, I want to say, wasn't as big as the first, but pretty darn close. And I will say, out of the three covers, not that this is a bad cover, but it is not as good as the first one, and definitely not as good as the third one.
Okay.
But
And
the content of it was very, very good.
Right. And real quick, hello to Black Dragon, who says B. Dalton was the other bookstore. Is B. Dalton still around anymore? Because I've never heard of them.
No, I didn't have them in my area, so I cannot say.
Okay. Well, that kind of leads into my next question, which is kind of the main question. And this is a two-parter, which is, overall, what's your thoughts specifically on Book 2? And is it a worthy follow-up to Book 1?
I would say it's a worthy follow-up to Book 1. You got to have all three. I don't see any of these books as a standalone.
Okay.
But I do see why. If you ever go back and look at the sales, the first one's off the charts. This one is good, off the charts, but not as good as the first one.
Right.
But in a series of 3 books, the second book is never as good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not to saying this isn't good. I need to find a better word, but that's the closest one I can. It's a good book. It's a good part 2, but it's not on par as the first book. And it's a small dip, but a very small dip.
Yeah, that's kind of the sense that I get from it too. I enjoyed it just as much as I did the first one, and it flows perfectly from book 1 right into book 2. But if I had to choose between the two that I've read or listened to so far, I got to say I enjoyed book 1 just that much more than book 2, although the reveals that book 2 does, can be at times bigger than book 1, and we'll get into those here in just a moment. So with that, like I said, guys, if you missed the last review that we did, we're going to be doing things very differently from here on out. I'm not going to do a beat for beat recap of these. We're just going to talk overall what this is about, mention some of the bigger moments for sure, but I'm not going to do any more beat for beat, tell you every single solitary detail of dialogue that happens anymore. So if you want to know in detail what we're talking about, I would highly recommend go find a copy yourself. They're still printing them, of course. Yes, they're under the Disney brand of Legends now. If that's not a deterrent for you, go that route. I'm sure you can still find on eBay like the pre-Disney Legends brand. I'm sure you can find those, or just get the audiobook like what I did. So with that, this book, continuing off the first one, is all about the Republic, the New Republic, and what's left of the Empire under Grand Admiral Thrawn, both trying to obtain this fleet of ships called the Katana Fleet, or otherwise known as the Dark Force. Now, the story behind the Dark Force is that these were a fleet of like 200 or so odd dreadnoughts that were completely lost in space after their crew suffered some form of weird mind virus that drove everyone insane, and they ended up killing each other.
The real quick, the dreadnoughts, even though George Lucas tried to keep this out, because he specifically does not mention pretty much about the Clone Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he wasn't ready to bring any of this out, but the dreadnought is pretty much a long stick of a ship. I don't have a comparison that
Let me see if I can find a picture.
But they're supposed to be Clone War area ship. This is before you get the Vector class in episode 1, 2, and 3. These are they originally were going to go with this style of ship.
I found a picture.
All right.
I found a picture specifically of the Katana Fleet.
Yeah. And remember also,
and real quick, trigger warning for those that are going to bother. Yes, this is from Wikipedia. I know they've been very controversial right now, but this is the best we got. So here is the Katana Fleet. And that is very different than what I was envisioning. Admittedly, I was envisioning like Clone Wars era Star Destroyers, like the Venator class.
This was originally the style of ships that if George Lucas was going to use, again, this is 92. This is pre what you see. You should say the Republic fleet in Return of the Attack of the Clones.
Right.
These were supposed to be ships that were supposed to be quote unquote styled from the Republic time, which end up getting scrapped later on. But real quick, you mentioned about Thrawn. Again, you have to remember, if the Republic is now about 70% of the galaxy, and the Empire, what remains of the Empire is 30%, Thrawn at this point only controls 20% of what's remainder of the Empire. The other 10% he does not control, and he refuses to force them to join him. He wants them to see him get success and then want to join him. So he's even working slightly less of what's available. He's working with 20% of the 30% of the galaxy.
Even still, though, with what we see in the last book and in this book, he is incredibly effective.
He is the last of the 12 Grand Admirals. And actually, if you go by in this book, when Akbar is getting ready to do his thing with the Republic, the Empire technically not the Empire, the New Republic tend to forget what happened to Thrawn or know anything about Thrawn. If they know anything, really the only two people in the galaxy outside the Empire is Mara Jade and
Talon Card.
And his boss. I forgot his boss. Never forget his boss. His boss was originally the one in charge. He was mostly a dealer of information. And he doesn't care who he sells it to.
Talon Card, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So,
So I'm sorry to hit us off. I just wanted to point that out before we go on.
no, it's fine. So let's talk about some of the big reveals that this book talks about from the last one. Now, looking and looking into this with a little bit of knowledge, kind of as like the broad strokes of the expanded universe in general, I already knew going into this trilogy that Mara Jade was a Force user trained by the Emperor to be the Emperor's hand. And Book 1 certainly confirmed that Mara Jade served as the Emperor's hand, but to my knowledge, Book 1 did not confirm that Mara Jade was outright a Force user. Book 2 was the one that brought that up, basically making a big deal of it that she feels the Force starting to come back to her, especially now that she's off of Merkur and away from all the Islamari.
Remember
And
this though, Mara Jade is an Emperor's hand, and right now, just to do real quick, in the future books, you'll come across it unconfirmed that she might not have been the only Emperor's hand.
I could see that.
Okay, but she is the one that's at this point in time the only Emperor's hand. So
it is confirmed in Book 2 that Mara Jade is a Force user, and that she received Book 1 may have mentioned this, but I'll go ahead and mention it anyways. She received a telepathic communication that she still hears in her head from the Emperor himself saying, "Kill Luke Skywalker." And he sent that to her literally as he was falling down the shaft just before he exploded in that blue whatever the heck that was. And real quick, Black Dragon says the only retail bookstores that I can recall are Walden Books, B. Dalton, Books A Million, we have those, and Borders.
Yeah, the Borders is the one I remember. I remember Walden's and Borders.
So, when you found out that Mara Jade herself was another Force user, Phil, what did you think of that?
Well, that was awesome because you had to remember up until that point, the only 4 you really knew about was Darth Vader, Yoda, Obi-Wan, Luke Skywalker.
And the Emperor.
And the Emperor, yes. But other than that, this is the first one out of nowhere, and first female Force user. If you don't count Leia, because you have to remember, technically, well, I guess you can say she's still getting trained even here, but
yeah,
I would say you can count her. Okay, we'll count her. So she's the second woman, but she's really the first devoted to the Force training, where Leia kind of does it, kind of not, kind of does it, kind of not.
Yes.
So, yeah, I thought it was awesome, and even though it doesn't come into this book, but finding out that she has a different color lightsaber.
Yeah. She, as far as if I'm not mistaken, she had a purple lightsaber before Mace Windu even existed.
Yeah,
right?
She was the original purple. She had the purple. At the time, people would say violet or pink, but technically, it was purple. It was purple.
And just for fun, let's bring up a picture of that. This is I believe this is a official image of her off her solo. And yes, by the way, certain companies do make replicas of this hilt. They're pretty expensive, but if you have that kind of money and want Mara Jade's lightsaber, you can find it.
And it's interesting to note that when you get into the game's Dark Forces, which leads into it, there is, I think, in the second one, Dark Forces 2, there's a separate, before you come out with DLCs, there was a second disc to the Dark Forces 2, and it's Mara Jade and Kyle Katarn from the game. So, which was also interesting. That comes again 2 years later after this book, which is pretty cool because, like I said, this was the start of the fans getting something, you know.
Right.
And believe me, at this point in time, even though we just got the very first book of the series, I forget the name off the top of my head. Sorry,
Heir to the
brain fart.
Empire.
Heir to the Empire. You know, this is the second one. You know, finally we're getting Star Wars. We are getting Star Wars, and
Yes.
I will say as a 1-2 punch. If I can remember 91 to 92, this was awesome. The feeling at the time was awesome. This was not, Disney with any of their books or movies. You didn't get this feeling. Maybe with the first movie, but not on this level when the second one came out because,
Right.
people wanted it. And you have to remember, even people that didn't read books
Got into it for Star Wars.
just got in it for Star Wars.
Right.
I really
Real
wish.
quick.
Sorry, go ahead.
Real quick, I do want to address what Mary here says. She says, "Yep, I saw that. I wonder if it was a poster. It's a book cover, and in fact, I'm going to bring up one we're going to cover here in the future. It's called Choices of One, and it's sort of a prequel to the Thrawn trilogy, but it's set during Return of the Jedi, and during that little talk that I had with Timothy Zahn at last year's ICC convention, he mentions that he wrote this story in an effort to sort of connect what the Empire was doing at the time with Luke's mission to rescue Han from Jabba the Hutt. And this is even further solidified in the first book of this trilogy, in the Thrawn trilogy, where, you had that scene in Merkur where Luke and Mara are trudging their way through and they stop at a campsite, and basically Mara reveals why exactly she hates Luke and reveals that she was there when Luke killed Jabba, or actually not when Luke killed Jabba, when Luke walked into Jabba's palace demanding Han Solo back. She was there in disguise as a dancer.
A lot of people says the redhead, the dancer in the special editions of Return of the Jedi, the one Boba Fett touches underneath her chin. She's a redheaded alien. A lot of people try to say that is Mara Jade in disguise.
I'm
It's never
trying to
been
find a picture
confirmed
of that.
or not confirmed, but I don't think so. I think that my belief, she was there in disguise as a human, not as an alien, and Luke's nightmare would have been true. Back then, the Force, some people in the Force would get premonitions like Anakin did. But if
Yeah.
you remember, not always is it true. Sometimes it could be a vision of an alternate occurrence. And in the alternate occurrence, Luke Skywalker, when he's waiting for R2 to shoot out his lightsaber, he sees his lightsaber go up in the sky, but it doesn't come into his
No,
hand.
Black Dragon. No, she was not the singer. I
Mm-mm.
am not okay with having Mara Jade associated with that abomination of a character.
But he has that vision, and the lightsaber goes to Mara Jade, who's on the other barge.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in that sense, in that reality of the dream, Luke fails.
Right.
So, yeah, and had it been that happened, it would have been a lot different. And also remember, Mara Jade is, when you're dealing with the Empire and the Emperor, she's not associated with Darth Vader. She knows Darth Vader. She's been around Darth Vader. But she is kind of like the opposite. Okay? Two people vying for the Emperor. And if Darth Vader does something, Mara Jade is the one to go after.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of like when the Emperor finds out about Luke, if Luke doesn't turn, Mara Jade's to go after him.
Yes.
Even if Darth Vader was still alive. And the whole purpose of that is to kill Luke to upset Vader.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? Or keep him in mind that the Emperor is always in charge.
Yes. And by the way, hello in the chat to Leia Rose. Thanks for joining.
Hello, Princess. That's a princess.
All right. So, anyways, so that's enough about Mara Jade for now. Another big reveal that happens, or a big moment rather, is when Luke finally goes to meet with Jaruus Sabaoth, the insane Jedi Master that had been hired by Thrawn. So
The clone
Jaruus,
Jedi.
yes, the clone, not the original Joruus Sabaoth. This is Jaruus, the clone. So he had been moved from Wayland, which we got something big to talk about with that in just a moment. But he had been moved from Wayland to another planet called Jomark. And Luke in Book 1 had made a brief connection with Master Sabaoth through the Force, with Sabaoth saying, "Hey, come to me and I can help complete your training and teach you more about how to be a Jedi." And finally, Luke in Book 2 goes and does that. And to say that Jaruus does very questionable things as a Jedi would be an understatement. Like, he's really making Luke question everything that Obi-Wan and Yoda not just taught him, but the way that they acted. Like, go back to episodes 4 and 5, and you have Obi-Wan and Yoda respectively being firm but kind teachers that were very much the embodiment of the Jedi. And yet here is Jaruus Sabaoth ruling over the people of Jomark like a tyrant, giving summary judgments over the most trivial of things, and flippantly using things like force lightning on citizens as punishment. So what did you think of that, Phil?
It kind of, in a way, remind me of the Emperor.
Mm-hmm.
Still wasn't sure at the time if you could say Force lightning is Sith or dark. But it seemed after reading this, since only two people you ever seen at the time use the lightning,
Mm-hmm.
is one Sith of the Emperor, and the other one is Jar Suboth, or whatever, however you say his name.
Of
But
course.
it's interesting at this point, you're also taking note. He isn't telling Thrawn, he's in telepathic communication with Luke. Just as much Thrawn is using him, he's also using Thrawn.
Yes, ultimately he said it himself. He wants a collection of Jedi that he can basically mold into his own image. The original deal was that if Sabaoth helped Thrawn with his battle meditation abilities win these different space battles against the New Republic, then Thrawn will deliver Luke Skywalker and especially Leia, who is pregnant with twins who are likely to be force sensitive. He would deliver them to Sabaoth, and there is a stink bug right in front of me. Excuse me for one quick second.
They're out early this year because of the abnormal weather.
I know, I hate that. Got him.
Now it's going to stink.
I do not care. As long as it's dead and not buzzing around, and you guys might have to hear it over the microphone. But anyways, what I really liked, I already mentioned it, but I really liked the comparisons between Obi-Wan and Yoda and Sabaoth, where Luke doesn't know what to think. He's like, this guy says he's a Jedi Master, and he existed from the time of Obi-Wan and Yoda, and yet he acts nothing like them. Were Yoda and Obi-Wan wrong? Am I going about this the wrong way? But at the same time, he knows deep down in his heart that what Sabaoth is doing is wrong. And I really like that dynamic that Luke had to face there.
Yeah, and you have to remember at this time, this isn't Luke focusing on training a new set of Jedi. Right? We haven't got anywhere near that in the books, and he's not at anywhere point in time right now. This is Luke Skywalker. Yeah, he's a Jedi, but he's still got one foot with Rogue Squadron and the New Republic.
Yeah.
Okay? He's still that guy. I mean, when you think of it and you're looking at him in Return of the Jedi, that's more Luke Skywalker Jedi. You see, but minus when he's there with his, on Hoth with the rest of Rogue Squadron, the snow fighters, snowmobiles, whatever you want to call them. That's Luke Skywalker, New Republic fighter pilot.
Yes.
Right now, you're dealing with Luke Skywalker. Yeah, he's a Jedi. He's the last and everything, and he kind of showing his sister here and there.
Not the last of the old, the first of the new.
Right. But he is still more in the mindset of Luke Skywalker, co-leader with Wedge of the New Republic Rogue Squadron.
Right.
So, you see him more doing things. Yeah, he's adventuring, but he's still doing New Republic things. He's still in his X-Wing. There's no one with him besides R2. And if you see him, like, especially in this book, he talks a lot about the New Republic.
He does.
His job is to, you don't see him saying, like, again, I need to build my Jedi. He's not there yet. He's not doing that yet. The war's still going.
Well,
let's just say that.
He is, in the sense that he cares for training Leia, and of course he cares for training his soon-to-be-born niece and nephew. But I agree, not to the scale of, I want to build an actual establishment here.
Yeah. And on a little side note, I think that's what's missing in the Disney Luke Skywalker early pre-Return of the Jedi, and if you want to call it episode, 7.
Right.
That's what's missing. You don't have that. You have what you see even with the shows. It's Luke Skywalker. Here's my Jedi Order. Or talking about training.
Real quick, Black Dragon says, I always thought his name was pronounced Sebaeth. I can see where you're coming from with that. I'm saying Sabaoth because, like I said, I'm coming at this from the audiobooks, which again, I'll mention it now. Mark Thompson does an amazing job reading these audiobooks, and they mix in some Star Wars music and sound effects with it. So if you're not really a reader, like I've kind of not become a reader lately, the audiobooks are very much a good option. And Sabaoth is how they pronounce it in the audiobooks.
I heard it both ways, but I've heard the audiobooks, and the audiobooks say it the way with the Y silent, Sabaoth.
Right. So let's move on from that. Of course, Luke ultimately sees that Sabaoth is wrong and he leaves. We'll get to that later. But now let's talk about Leia and Chewie off on their own little side quest, trying to turn the Noghri people away from the Empire. So kind of recapping a little bit from book 1. The Noghri came into service of the Empire to begin with because apparently this one, at least how the story goes, this one battle between the rebellion and the Empire took place over their homeworld of Honoghr. And the fallout from this battle, some sort of chemical fell on the planet, ruining the soil and all vegetation. And along comes the Empire saying, hey, we see what's happened to your planet. We'll help cleanse your planet because the rebellion ruined it.
More Vader took that.
Yeah, specifically Vader was the one that said that.
And in a way, how can we say he's doing it? It's Vader, but he's acting like old Anakin in a way.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to help you. It was the evil of the rebellion. We're going to give you everything you need. Only thing the Empire wants from you
I think
is
it's
service.
I think you could see it as both Anakin and Vader
Mhm.
acting here, where yes, you have the desire to help of Anakin, but it's corrupted by the mentality of Vader saying, "What can I get out of these people? Not how can I make their lives better?"
And the one thing that we can say he unintentionally does
Mm-hmm.
is when they swear loyalty, they're swearing loyalty to Vader, not really the Empire. And in a sense, that opens up a can of worms because now, or when we find later on, that allegiance doesn't just go to Vader. That
It
goes
goes
to the
to
offspring,
yeah, it
you
goes to
know,
later goes to Leia,
which
whom they call
unintentionally Vader helps, in
yeah,
a way.
whom yeah. In fact, they refer to Leia as Lady Vader, or or in their language, the Malariush, the offspring
Mm.
of Vader. And
And
real
she
quick,
despises that name.
I gotta mention what Resolute Rebellion says. He says, "Cleanse, the scariest words ever. We are with the government and we're here to help." I'm just gonna leave that one there. You guys can take that as you will.
Yeah. But just remember, even though Leia accepts them after all this and the
Mm-hmm.
help, she always never feels right. Even when she makes peace about her dad, she never really, even though she lets him say it, she does not like the name Lady Vader.
No, she
But
doesn't.
they can't stop saying it, so she accepts it. But
Mm-hmm.
as far as it being said, it's just a word she, doesn't like.
So so basically she goes to try and convince the Nogri people the Empire is just using you for basically your sons in their wars. They're using your sons as cannon fodder. Turn against them and we'll give you basically your liberty.
Yep.
And at first, she isn't really getting through to the matriarch or the matriarch of this one clan whom okay, so in book 1 there was a surprise attack by the Nogri by a small band of Nogris on Leia and Chewie on Kashyyyk. And of this band of Nogris that tried to attack her, only one survived. His name was Kabarak. He was captured and questioned. This was when Leia first learned that her father's, position with the Nogri people could be a benefit to her too. And it's through that a meeting with the Nogri people was set up through Kabarak. So the Nogri were very honor driven. Were a very honor driven race, and they thought it honorable to serve the Empire because, in their mind, Vader saved their planet from basically being completely uninhabitable as far as growing food.
They actually hate any negative comments about Vader.
Mm-hmm.
So Leia had to watch her P's and Q's. Other thing to remember, since that attack, that kind of doesn't sit well with the Nogri because even though that was ordered, the Nogri aren't allowed to attack the offspring of Vader. So
Yeah.
the clan responsible for doing the attack, even though it was ordered, kind of did a no-no because regardless, they're not supposed to harm Vader or his offspring. And again, Vader never intended that. That wasn't put in his idea when he tricked these people. It just developed that way.
Yeah.
Their culture is you honor the Vader and his offspring. And if the Empire tells them, "Oh, go and kill Leia. They don't know Leia, but they know her and find out she is Lady Vader, the offspring of Vader. So that
Exactly.
tax a no. And also remember, it's not a book, but it's an Heir on the Tales of the Empire. There's a short story about Thrawn, and that in that story you find out why Vader gives him some Nalgri to serve him. One of the few, and only. He didn't do that for the Emperor. He didn't do that for anybody else, but he did it for Thrawn. So if you
I
ever get
believe
to
it.
read the short, I forget the name of the short story, but it's in Tales of the Empire. It tells you the story of how much Thrawn and Vader got along, which was unheard of,
Mhm.
and how he earned the right to have Nagri as his bodyguard.
Right.
So,
So, what else we find out while Leia is on Hanagar hanging out with the Nogri? We find out that secretly, yes, the Nogri consider it honorable to serve the Empire, but secretly, it's a burden. They recognize that it's also a burden. They don't want to do that, but they don't see any other way out currently. But eventually Leia figures out that in reality, the Empire isn't cleansing their planet. It's already been cleansed. But there's this plant called comb grass that grows on their planet that the Empire sort of genetically engineered to slowly poison their planet all over again in order to fool them into thinking your planet's still poisoned, you need our help. So, what did you think of that, Phil?
typical Vader manipulating. You have to say it's brilliant. We're here to save you from contamination. But we have this wonderful plant that's supposedly going to help you with the decontamination, only for that plant to keep the contamination going.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Black Dragon says the chapter title is First Contact. Okay. And so Leia presents this evidence that she finds to the Nogri Council, and again, at first they think they're gonna just arrest her right on the spot because they have orders from Thrawn, because Thrawn knows she's there. But they have orders from Thrawn to arrest her, but she manages to talk her way out of it and show the evidence, and manages to sway enough public opinion where the leader of the council is like, fine, we understand this. We'll see what we can do about it, basically. So I'm looking forward to see how that pays off in book 3. We get, of course, some more scenes of Han and Lando working together where they run across, through a series of complicated events, they run across this one former Corellian senator named Bel Iblis, who said that he himself had found the Dark Force fleet at one point and was at one point working with the rebellion, but didn't get along with Mon Mothma, and kind of thought that Mon Mothma, if the rebellion had won, would kind of assert herself as basically the Emperor all over again in all but name. So, what did you think about that, Phil?
I liked the twist. I liked it. Real quick, that was, even though that was part of the book, what Black Dragon said, that wasn't the one. It's the other one. It's called Side Trip. It's also in the book. Side Trip is where Thrawn pretends to be Jodo Cast. And that's another story for another day. But it's
Right.
Side Trip. First
Okay.
Contact also a Thrawn story, but the last one, Side Trip, is the one that I was talking about.
Okay, fair enough.
But the one thing I would tell you about this book is Thrawn, as you can see, he's the main antagonist, but there's other parts of the story, you know, and
Yes.
and all this is important because it sets up that final conflict,
Yeah.
you know, and you're seeing everything getting put together. I mean, when you say about the Nalgiri being lied to, this all gets played out in the end. All
Right.
gets played out. So you're seeing the pieces of the puzzle coming together. So, and you have to put also in your mindset, the Empire is not sitting still.
No.
They have a Grand Admiral. No, they don't have on equal footing with the New Republic. But let's be honest, when you're as you're reading the story, and definitely in this book, you see the New Republic is scared. There's a
Yes.
Grand Admiral, and with 20% out of what would be 30% of the Empire, which controlled the galaxy, with 20%, the New Republic ain't thinking they're going to win. The New Republic is actually thinking we're going to lose.
And
And
not
that's
only
something to
and
think about it. Think about it. If you said you had 70% of the United States and 20% is 30% is against you, but you're only really facing 20% of that, but you're scared of that 20% winning,
Mhm.
and you're already having your headset. The only person at this time that does not believe, well, actually, two people or three, is Leia,
Mhm.
Mamatha, and Akbar.
Yes, which
Everybody else is thinking
let's
defeat.
let's talk about Akbar though for a second. This is kind of a recap from book 1, but about 3/4 of the way through book 1, Akbar is wrongfully arrested for treason due to some shady banking stuff that happened with his bank account apparently being tied to certain imperial accounts.
You're right. Well,
And there
you
was
have to.
another
Sorry, go ahead.
let me finish real quick, Phil. There was another council member, a Bothan named Phalia, that was well known to be Akbar's political rival,
Mhm.
that basically took advantage of Akbar's arrest and inserted himself into Akbar's role. And then we find out in book 2 that Phalia is a double agent for Thrawn, that
Yeah.
he's there to purposefully stir up political unrest within the New Republic to weaken them as much as possible from the inside. We also find out, and this one I literally just remembered. We also find out that Winter, Leia's handmaiden, is also a spy for the Empire, and that one really hit me.
You think of it this way, and this is what I like. Why I like this book. Even though the Empire, you would say, had lost a lot, and it did,
Mhm.
the New Republic isn't all united. Like,
No.
if you can, I'm just trying to put it together for people to see. Maybe 40% of that 70% of what the New Republic controlled the galaxy, the other 30% was forcibly taken from the Empire or
Mhm.
coerced to join the Empire. So their loyalty is questioned. And as when Grand Admiral Thrawn comes back into and the New Republic finds out, they start even in the Senate, in the New Republic Senate, are pointing fingers at former imperialists, like, okay, you guys are double agents, and all this little messages that are going on back and forth is because even though these people joined the Empire, I mean New Republic, but they still have imperial feelings, most of them were okay with it. But now
Yeah.
you have the Empire planting seeds of distrust. The Bothans. The Bothans were big in Return of the Jedi, but what you find out, a lot of the Bothans were loyal to the Empire.
Yeah. And
And the
not only
one that
that,
does not like Akbar is because he wants Akbar's position.
yeah, like it's made a big deal in this
Mhm.
book that Bothans only care about political power for them, gaining political power for themselves
Yep.
and making themselves basically the most important person in the room. And Phalia is the biggest case of that.
Yeah.
In fact,
They'll
that's one of
join
the
the
things.
Empire if the Empire is winning, and they will join the New Republic if the New Republic is winning.
Yes. Real quick, I want to address something in the chat talking about that side trip thing. Black Dragon said Timothy Zahn wrote 3 stories in Tales of the Empire: First Contact, Side Trip Part 1, and Side Trip Part 4. Michael A. Stackpole wrote Side Trip Part 2 and 3.
Yep. Stackpole is also known for writing the Legends for well, it was now Legends, all the X-Wing series. So when you get into the X-Wing books, it's about the Rogue Squadron and Wedge. Yeah,
Of
Michael
course.
Stackpole wrote a lot of that.
Okay.
So he also wrote a lot in what's in Tales of the Republic.
Right.
It's a counter, different from the Tales of the Empire. So
Now, let's go back to Phalia for a moment. At the end of book 2, Phalia does get his comeuppance because he tries to forcibly, during this one battle between part of the rebels, or sorry, the New Republic forces. Yes, Wedge and Rogue Squadron are there, and the Empire's there, and basically both of them are at the location of the Katana fleet, and they're trying to engage each other, and Phalia is trying to forcibly have his forces withdraw from the battle and just leave Han and Luke and Wedge and all of them out to dry. And Leia, who is on Phalia's ship, along with Talon Card, they're trying to get him not to, but he's not listening. But then basically Talon Card tricks him into admitting how he really feels about his soldiers over the intercom, and that basically causes everyone to mutiny against him. So that was a pretty satisfying moment.
it does, but you have to remember it comes at a cost. Because when we're there, when they're going after the fleet, I forget exactly how many of the dreadnoughts are in that fleet.
There were originally 200, but they find that by the time they get there, there's only 15 left.
Or no, that's how many the Republic got out
Exactly.
of that. Yeah, the rest were taken by the Empire.
Yes.
But I was wondering what the exact number as a whole of the fleet. I think it was 100 or something around there. It was a large number. For them to only come out with 18, it was lucky because everything that Bothan did. But the Empire walked away with almost 90% of the fleet. Thrawn got more ships.
Yes.
And there was something special about the dreadnoughts. You could sink them all together, where kind of like a
they call it a slave rig.
Yeah, so if one person is, say, like an admiral or captain's in charge of one ship, even though there's other people on the other ships, the ships is going to follow the orders of that one ship.
Yes.
So it's like the command and control of the ships, of all of them. And there was I think it was Talon that had something to try to break it, and that's why they were able to get to 18. But sadly, like I said, the Empire walks away with the vast majority of the ships. But Thrawn was upset. Even though he did get the vast majority of the ships, he wanted them all.
Exactly.
So this was a setback, and Thrawn does have setbacks.
And that's again, I said it last time we talked about book 1. That's one of the things that I really like about Thrawn. Because again, going into these stories, I had already heard of Thrawn, had already heard of just how much of a tactical genius he was. But I like that they still made him, that they basically didn't make him completely flawless.
Right.
I like it where, yes, he made mistakes and he lost battles, but he took it in stride and basically like, okay, we lost this one, but on to the next one.
Yep. He was able to adapt, and that's what you have to do. I mean, any leader except for maybe Alexander the Great, everybody lost a battle. it's not about winning all the time, but if you lose a battle, that shows a person's their character and how they react to the next battle. You know, some people when they lose one battle, they keep losing, but they haven't recovered. Thrawn is not that person. He loses a battle, he learns the mistake, just like you said, on to the next battle. He's already
Exactly.
on to step two, and he's not rigid. Where if his battle plan goes bad, he sees
He
another way of using that same
yeah, he
plan, even
adapts on
going
the fly.
bad, to his advantage. So, yeah.
So the big reveal that happens at the very end of this book is that the landing force that attacks Luke and Han and all of them on the flagship of the Dark Force fleet are all made of clones. And that basically is what the Wayland Project is.
Mhm.
So, so let me ask you this, Phil. When you first heard of the Wayland Project back on book 1 and earlier in book 2, and then you get the reveal that it's cloning, is that what you expected it to be?
You have to remember this is before the cloning with the
Right.
first episode, episode 1, 2, and 3, and that type of deal. The thing about this is you're getting clonings and you're hearing about people being, the Empire's making clones.
Mm-hmm.
Does this have anything to do with the Clone Wars that we always heard about, but know nothing about? You notice there's this great That's because George Lucas doesn't let you know anything about that. So
Exactly.
you got that mystery hanging over your head. What is the deal with the Clone Wars and clones? And yet you're bringing into this book clones. Now you understand it because they tell you as you're reading the book about the clones why it's being done, because they don't have enough people, even with 30% of the galaxy
Mm-hmm.
under the Imperial forces. They don't have enough people. And on top of that, they let's just say for like the Dark Fleet, uh, they have no people there unless they clone them. They don't have people to man that fleet.
Exactly.
So to make up the numbers, they have to do the clones. And you have to remember from the very first book, Thrawn isn't going to what's that planet again with the clone facilities and the
Camino.
not Camino, the one in the book.
Wayland.
Wayland. He isn't going to Wayland because he's looking for Jarvis C. Booth. He's going there for the cloning facility.
Yes. And
That's what he needs. Jarvis C. Booth was a little treat, if we can say, because he needs him cloning facility because he needs to put his people that he does have, he needs clones.
Exactly. And speaking of clones, I know that without saying anything spoilers, I do know that a certain character gets cloned himself and finds, we'll say, a certain artifact from episode 5 to use as a weapon.
Yep.
So I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out. But I think we've covered just about everything, that at least the big moments from this book. Like I said, anything that we did not cover, guys, if you want to find out what those are or find out a little bit more information about what we did talk about, highly recommend seeking out this book yourself. Seek out the whole trilogy. Next week, we will be talking about the final book, The Last Command, and we'll also be deciding where we're going from there. I will say, I know you and I, Phil, had compiled a list of different Star Wars books for me to look at from Legends Canon, or EU rather. One thing that I intend to add to that list at some point is I want to look at the novelizations for the movies, because you know how novelizations for any movie will add in certain details to it that weren't in the movies. Like I distinctly remember this for Raiders of the Lost Ark. I had actually read the Raiders of the Lost Ark novelization before I ever saw the movie, and I was confused, like, wait a minute, where's all these details from the movie? So I want to take a look at the novelizations for each of the movies and look at the differences between the movies and the books. Now, that's not going to happen, anytime too terribly soon, but that is something that I do intend to do at some point.
Understandable.
Have you gotten into any of the novelizations?
I read them back in the day, you know. Definitely the first three I read it in book form. As far as episode 1, 2, and 3, I honestly haven't.
Okay.
But I do, for one thing, will tell you, I do recommend the next 3 books after this series.
Okay, and which are those?
I forget the name off the top of my head, but the next 3 are not written by Timothy Zahn. He passed the baton. He'll come back and do other books, but
Mm-hmm.
the next 3 are just as much tied together to the first 3, but you have a whole new different setting. You're dealing with the Luke setting up the Jedi Academy, a new evil. I don't know if you want to call it.
Is this
evil.
is this the story where Palpatine comes back as a clone?
No, that's future down the road. This is where you come in. Well, I'll say it. Admiral Dala. Admiral Dala is a female, first female that you get introduced as in the Empire as a leader. And she was handpicked by Tarkin. They were actually a thing. And during the time of from A New Hope to right after the Last Command, she's in charge of the Maw. And a Maw is like a black hole, but it's like one little planet in there that's stable enough that you won't get sucked into the black hole.
Almost like the wormhole from Deep Space Nine.
Kind of. But there's no other outlet. There's one way in. And in that Maw is a miniature Death Star. It was a prototype. And her job by Tarkin is to keep the research and development going on that planet and to protect the mini prototype Death Star. The thing is, it's like 6-7 years and she hasn't got a command or order. So she decided to send some of her ships out to get information, and lo and behold, what they come back and tell her isn't what she wants to hear.
So
Tarkin's
is
dead,
this what it's called here? The Jedi Academy trilogy?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's it. And so she comes in where Thrawn is just gone. So now you get her trying to make she offers her service to, you have to remember, after Thrawn dies, the galaxy goes even further against the Empire. So now they're down to 15%.
Right.
And when she offers her services to any warlord, there's no leader now, no Thrawn, nobody, no Emperor. And she offers her service to anybody that would fight the New Republic. And she finds out they're all too busy fighting themselves, not even worried about the New Republic. And pretty much what's left, that 15%, it scraps. So she gets upset and takes control and goes wages a war against the New Republic on her own.
I see.
And then you have the story also. It's about Luke starting his Jedi. This is where Kyle Katarn comes in. This is where you see the he starts assembling a new Jedi Order.
So this is apparently what they're called: Jedi Surge, Dark Apprentice, and Champions of the Force. Okay. Is this where Mara Jade finally gets married to Luke?
At the end. I believe it's at the end. At the end.
All right. Well, yes. If that's where we want to go after the Thrawn trilogy is done, I am all for that. So we're going to go ahead and shut this down for the night. Thank you, of course, Phil, for coming over and talking about this with me. Real quick, I'm going to plug something. Earlier this week, me and Phil got together and did a little project on his channel, Release McCracken, where we did a review of every single studio album that Black Sabbath ever put out. I'm going to put the link in the chat for you guys to go check it out if you haven't seen it. We did unfortunately have some. We did unfortunately have to deal with some copyright shenanigans, but those have been taken care of. So go give this a watch. Go subscribe to Phil if you haven't already. Brandon, the anime guy, was there. Make sure you're subscribed to him also. And I guess in about a month or so, Phil, we're going to do another retrospective like this on Deep Purple. That's what we
Yes,
agreed.
we're going to split that in two, and how we're going to do that, I'll let people know. We're going to do Deep Purple from the start to the initial disbandment of the band in 1976. So you're going to get the first phase will be 70 to 76.
So that's part one.
Part one, and
Okay.
then part two will be when they get a reunion and reform in 1984 to now. And
Okay.
I'm not sure about that second part because there's a lot there from 84 to now, and we might have to break that down to part 2A and part 2B.
We'll
So
see
it
what
might end
we
up
will see
having
what
to be
happens.
a three-parter.
We'll see what happens. All right, but anyways, real quick, have a good night, Resolute Rebellion. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit like. Oh, actually, hold on. No, one more thing. I got to mention one more thing before we go. We're a bit ahead of schedule on this, but this coming Tuesday, I've talked with Crit and Cash and Pacific, and we're pretty much all in agreement. Tuesday Night Trek is returning this coming Tuesday, but we're not quite going back to Deep Space Nine yet. By request of Lord Crit, we're going to go ahead and look at the movie Star Trek Generations. So, unfortunately, we're going to be watching Captain Kirk die. So,
and I have a story to tell you about that.
Save it for Tuesday, okay?
Yeah, I'll save it.
All right. So like I said, guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. And just remember, everyone, the Force is family. And Phil McCracken hates you all.
I
See you
hate
later.
you all.